Hey Todd, taking an intermission real quick mid conversation, but I'd like to introduce you to the audience. For anyone who doesn't know you, who do you say you are?
I'm Ty Carter, and I am a engagement specialist. What does that mean? Helping people get engaged in life, no matter where you're at, being fulfilled, being happy, finding joy.
Hmm, I like it. And I like your sign back there that says dad.
I'm a dad, and a proud dad. Um, but going back to this rolling start where we're at about the conflict in work, and sometimes people are so unhappy in the things that they're doing, and they got all these things that they're chasing. I believe there's natural conflict because most of us in life, we have the expectations of others that lead our path to work, whether it be parents, I want you to be a doctor, or a mentor that says, you know what, I did it, didn't work for me, you should do that. And we then follow this thing and we do all this education or we do all this training and we get into it. And now we are not fulfilled, but now rent is due. I am hungry, so I must continue to go. And the longer that you don't deal with that internal conflict, then frustration builds up. And then when the CEO or the coworker says something out of line, you're like, you can't even handle it. Like you're out, I'm out of here but really it's been frustration over a period of time.
Mhm.
Then you have this part of you where I'm passionate about this. I feel like this is my purpose.
Mhm.
And those two things can have conflict with inside of yourself because, man, I'm really passionate about photography, but but my purpose is to help small business. And if you can't figure out how to join those things, then they'll continue to separate like a wishbone and they'll never come together. And you have this internal conflict and you'll be all over the place and just not niching down. And that doesn't mean entrepreneurship. That can even mean in the corporate world that just like I don't feel at rest. I don't feel happy in the thing that I do. So I
Mhm.
think this conversation is timely because I think a lot of people are not clear on what they should be doing. And I think you can be fulfilled and happy as a school teacher for life,
Mhm.
as a police officer for life. I know there's a pressure to, hey, everyone should be an entrepreneur and all this type of thing. That's
Yeah.
cool. But I think the deeper side of that is that you should have another side of revenue. And that doesn't like, I think back in the day, you think of the 50s or whatever, like they would have a job and then maybe that lemonade stand. Like, and again, like, hey, that is not the full time, but
Mhm.
Honey's gonna want a car soon, so that stand's gonna pay for the car.
Yeah.
Over on this side, I'm good and I'm fulfilled. And I think we got into this place where people are just unhappy. And I think there's a stat that talks about over 70, 80% of people are unhappy with the work that they do.
Mhm.
And that's a problem.
Yeah.
People are waking up going to a place that they're angry and they're frustrated of being there. What kind of life is that? And so, yeah, so I mean, that's to that statement that you made. I think you're set up from the start if you're not paying attention to not be happy in the work that you're doing.
Yeah. I think I heard I follow a lot of Jordan B. Peterson. He's a Canadian psychologist out of Canada,
Yes,
obviously.
yeah,
But a lot of what he says is like well thought out um, clarifications on what it is that people are looking for. And a lot of
yeah,
times he does a good job of putting into words like complex emotions or just things that you don't know you you have an inkling of what you want, but you don't exactly know like how to say it or how to put it. And
yes,
as I'm talking through this, I'm thinking it's like we're still in a relaxed conversation state. I know I did the intro or whatnot, but it's like we're still flowing and just going back
yeah.
and forth. But one of the things that he said that I took a liking to was that everybody talks about, I need to be happy, I need to be happy, I need to be happy. And it's like, you'd be better off doing something that fulfills you to where happiness is an emotion that will come and go. But it's like, if happy is what you're always striving for, you might put all your eggs on into the wrong basket where it's like, okay, maybe I'll be the starving artist, but it's like, okay, why not do something that pays the bill, and then you can still be
Oh,
an
that's
artist
good.
that's able to express yourself one way or
Yeah,
another.
I think that's really good because I think we have all these different ages. We're in the social media age and so forth. And I think there was a period of time where what you would see on TV or in the movies, like, happily ever after.
Mm.
Like, hey, what's your happily ever after?
Right.
And that's important. But let's say you don't really know what that is yet.
Mhm.
Does that mean you wander aimlessly to find happily ever after? Or do you go to the grocery store and become a clerk and make sure the bill is paid? And you pay that bill, make sure the bill is paid as you discover yourself.
Mm.
But what happens is we either take two paths. We go wander aimlessly and maybe we find it, maybe we don't because we didn't seek the guidance or coaching, or we go to work and then we forget about the happily ever after and again get back to frustration and we
Right.
don't do any deep work on ourselves. I think, but again, if you don't have the right mentorship or friend group around you, how do you know to do that?
Mm.
And so I think a friend recently told me that the most millionaires happen between the ages of 50 and 60, I believe.
Mhm.
And I believe that at 50 years old, you figure it out.
Yeah.
You've been around the block enough times to say, you know what? I actually know what I like now. And then you accelerate so fast and you have great success and you're happy.
Mhm.
It took 50 years because nobody really kind of told you. You kind of figured it out. You made a lot of bumps and bruises.
Yeah.
It's something about this 50 to 60 range where not that you had a tech startup, I'm talking about like just natural
Mhm.
millionaires, 9 to 5, whatever it may be, it happens in that space.
Right.
And it's
Right.
it's something where you get real comfortable. I don't know, we didn't talk age, but I don't know if you met most 50 to 60 year olds are really confident in who they are most.
Yeah.
It's something
Yeah.
about that age where like, whatever, forget everybody else.
Yeah.
I know I am. And so what happens in that space that we can tap into and take it back to the 20-year-old or
Mm.
the 25-year-old? Because if we're going to have impact in this world, we not only want to have wisdom, but we're going to have strong legs too. And
Yeah.
so I think all this is interesting and I love talking about it.
That's a great point because it's funny, like I was sharing with you earlier, I feel like in doing what I'm doing now, working at this current role, this current job, is that I guess some people would say career as well because there's a little bit more that's involved with it. But I finally feel like almost 2.5 years, 3 years in, I feel confident and find that I've found my voice and that I know who I am. I'm clear on like what I'm saying. I have an understanding of like, okay, this is the gravity of what role I play here to where if I don't speak up or when I see something, if I don't say something about it, then it's like I could actually be creating more problems or letting things like devolve and just fall apart. Is not to say, okay, I've got to play Superman, but no, it's like I've actually recognized that, okay, when I operate in what some people would call like your genius, when I operate in my genius, it's like, okay, I like things to be organized and I like them to be lined up and just like ABC 1, 2, 3, like plain and simple to where
Yeah.
if I've got the ball, I'm running with it, I'm running with it. I can hand it off to the next person and they can run with it. It's like it doesn't have
Yes.
to be like a word salad or this or that, but it's just having that kind of clarified up my mind at like 34 and I'm like, okay, like I can appreciate the age that I'm at now. Like I'm not being overly anxious trying to solve for other people's problems or like even when I'm tasked with solving other people's problems, it's like having spent enough time doing the work on myself and like getting information to maybe resolve some unknown things that aren't clear in my mind, like having proper boundaries for instance is something that I've had to address for myself. Having proper rest, like we talk about, like being tired, and even seeing that, like one of the things that came out of that video I was watching was that any deficit, it maybe takes you up to 2 weeks to recover any sleep deficit that you have to
Oh,
where
wow.
if I think they used to say that maybe 8 hours of sleep is what you want to try and get to, but it's like
Sure.
that can vary for different people. Some people can do it less, some people need a little bit more, but once you actually get to know yourself and you know this is what works, this is what doesn't, and you kind of work towards that. Anytime it kind of goes off, like you could lose an hour here or have a bad night of sleep, and that's like 2 hours that you're withdrawing. It's like now you owe your body 2 hours, and you do that 6 days a week or 7 days in the week, it's like you've built up a credit of like 8, 10, 12, 16 hours. And it's like, okay, at some point your body's going to be like, I need my rest. Like
Sure.
you're not just going to have us running around doing this, doing that. And it's like, okay, like being able to like be on the road all this week, come back, rest, and like seeing that my bed's able to track my sleep. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Like in my wildest mind, that would have never crossed my mind to be like, oh yeah, you should invest in this thing. And even now I'm kind of on the fence thinking, do I keep this thing because it's on a trial level, or do I like invest in me and make sure that, hey, like it's time to grow up, be a big boy now. It's like you got a big boy bed, like treat this with the proper respect going forward.
You said your bed tracks your sleep.
Yes.
That's amazing. That is so amazing, especially if you know that sleep is how you get to your optimal. I think if that's amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
the mere fact that you have it says a lot. Like,
Yeah.
man, you're ahead, sir.
Thank you.
You are definitely ahead. A bed that tracks sleep. My goodness, you have to give me that after this is over.
Well, I mean, I'll just there. It's not a sponsor or anything, but it's like it's a sleep number. And the
Oh, the
funny
sleep
thing is,
number.
like,
Okay.
I got it. I got my first bed that I bought. I don't know why I did quotation marks. I did buy a bed when
The
I s
bed.
well, okay. Well, I guess I the quotation marks are appropriate because, like, my first job out of college was working for a construction company, and part of the thing that attracted me to them was that they had a 2-year training program where the the thing was that you would travel for 2 years, and every 6 months you would be in a different department, in a different state, or in a different part of the world, maybe a different country. So it'd be like, "Oh, wow, I could go abroad." Like, I didn't do study abroad in college, but maybe I could do
Sure.
it for work. And I can make money while I'm studying abroad and maybe be somewhere where you can also vacation.
Yeah,
So,
that's good.
like, at first I thought I was going to LA, but obviously the abbreviation state-wise, LA is Louisiana, not Los Angeles. So it's like that's where I found myself. And you go to like this first week of orientation, and one of the things that they do is they bring in other trainees, and they call them uh what is it? Maybe like the abbreviation may it escapes me at the moment, but it may not be important. But basically, you bring in somebody that's like 6 months in, or a year in, 5 years
Yeah.
in, to say, okay, here's the progression of where you could be in the company. And
Yeah, understood.
the whole goal of it is to say, um, you're trying to figure out where you best fit. And we also want to put you in the best fit for the company so that it's a win-win. So when we're going through this process, you'll figure out where you want to go, and we'll figure out where we can place you. And one of the girls that spoke up, one of the other engineers, she spoke up and she said that during the 2-year program, she basically slept on an air mattress to like, and it worked for her. She was like able to save money. And the whole thing was that you wanted to travel light because you could be asked to move at a moment's notice, like within a month, within a week. And some of us thought they were kidding, but no, like within a week, it's like, hey, you're going from Louisiana to um, just outside of Chicago next week. So I
Wow.
found out like Tuesday, Wednesday, and I needed to be there the following week. And of course, like the the supervisors that you work with, they know what the program is, and they'll give you like flexibility to say, okay, hey,
Sure.
yeah, you're due to come in. You can come in the middle of the week. You don't have to start exactly Monday. Make sure you get your housing situated. Make sure you can break your lease, like things like that. It's like, do you have a 6 month lease? No, like we you gotta have a year. What's this
So
like
so
short term lease?
you would be there for at least 6 months, or it would be what would the time frames?
So the time frame for me, my first assignment was Lake Charles, Louisiana. I was there for 4 months. So
Okay.
initially it was thought to be 6 months. Within the first month, like 12 engineers were brought in. And then I think one by one, everyone started to go. So like within a month, like somebody's already getting reassigned to somewhere else. And then
Got it.
I was kind of getting a little curmudgeon-y, bitter, to where I'm like, why am I staying here? Like people are so mean. I don't know if it's like the hurricanes that have come through, or they just like customer service just wasn't it wasn't great. Like there were some great places to eat because of course you're in Louisiana and like
Sure.
food's amazing. And it's just like some people were receptive, but also working in like the nuclear field, it was
Sure.
going into a place where they called it like a chilled work environment. So basically the Nuclear Regulatory Commission came in and said like you guys have to shut down production because the way that you're operating, you're making it unsafe for people to bring up concerns. Like you're so focused on production
Oh,
to where
wow.
you're not considering the safety with which you should be leading. And it's
Yeah,
like the
absolutely.
story might be told a little differently, but fast forward to 2024, 10 years later, the work has been completed. 10 years later, 12, 14 years later, however long it took to build the project. But it's like I spent 4 months there and then I was like, okay, hey, I'm gonna get reassigned. I'm gonna leave Louisiana because like Charles, there's been some good and some bad and
Sure.
kind of everything in between. But then I found out that I was staying in Louisiana for another year. And I was
Oh,
like, I don't like that. But the project was that I would be doing my first construction project as a field engineer. And now I would
mhm.
be in Donaldsonville, which is like right off the Mississippi River, like 45 minutes from south of Baton Rouge and maybe like an hour from New Orleans or
Sure.
Nolans, however different people say it. So I thought that was going to be hectic, but it actually turned out to be one of the best experiences I had because I was asked to go to Houston, just outside. I think it was Fairbanks, like just outside of Houston. And I was supposed to be there for maybe like 1, 2 weeks to do a little bit of training and to get this TWIC card, which is what you need to work on marine
Yeah.
bases.
Yeah.
But
Go to
I
ports.
guess, yeah, to go to ports. But thankfully, or unfortunately, TSA, as TSA may sometimes, they had a misprint with my card. And
Oh,
it was just like they misprinted a whole bunch of people's cards. So what was supposed to be 1 to 2 weeks of orientation turned into a month and a half of
oh,
me living out of a hotel, going to work at the local office there. And I became a Texas resident because if you spend more than 30 days in Texas, you unofficially officially become a resident.
that's where I just came back from for the week. Yeah.
Oh,
Dallas,
nice.
Dallas and Houston. Yeah.
Nice.
It's hot out there.
So it's like what I thought was going to be a year and what I was dreading, like once I finally got on site, met the guys, and like part of the reason I like to do this podcast is like meeting those guys that I met in construction from that project, the guys at the fabrication shop, both
Yeah.
engineers, but mainly the people that are the hands-on blue collar craft, like how they cut up, joke, like just the stories that they have. It's like, hey, a lot of this work is going to be manual labor. There's going to be some critical thinking and things like that, but you're not in ideal circumstances. And when I'm there, it's like May. It's probably so like I did January to like um 4 months, January to about April. And then from like April to May, spending that time in Texas. And then you're talking about peak summertime, Louisiana heat, working on a steel tank where it's like it's hot, like 110 degrees plus, and you're wearing long sleeves because that's part of our policy to like keep from any hot metals or anything that keep from burning you. But it's like we worked all the way up through the end of February, which the project went on time. I did my due diligence and they were like, well, we really don't need an engineer for this part of the project. So you might want to let your coordinator know that they need to move you on to the next thing. So then 1 year became 9 months that I spent on the project.
Wow.
And then from me reaching out, it was like, okay, I didn't hear back for the last 2 weeks the last 2 weeks of February. And then the last week of February, I found out on a Tuesday, Wednesday, hey, you're going to Plainfield, Illinois next week. Your start date will be March 1st. And then I was like, okay, that'll be interesting, but it's 19 degrees at the moment. I like remember it like it was yesterday because like you're working 120 feet up in the air using like the bread and board scaffold, the chicken ladder that's up on the top. And like I didn't think I was afraid of heights initially, but like I had the little sea legs where I was like,
Wow.
I don't like how this is moving, but it was it was funny just like kind of going through that process. But it's like once you get the muscle memory of climbing the ladder, like, every day for, like, months and months and months and months, okay, it's like, this is just like anything else, and then you start
Wow.
using the, JGL to operate, or you have somebody that's trained in it operate it to get you up there, so it's like, we we had a hall watch that somebody that they hire, like, a temporary worker to
Mhm.
come in and keep an eye on the guys that are working, that way it's like, um she basically watches them, make sure, "Hey, are you guys in there? Okay. Is your air monitoring okay? And if anything else emergency comes up, we've gotta get down." But obviously, she wasn't a fan of heights, and, like, when you go up on those scissor lifts or the things that have, like, the arm where they raise up and they move around and set you
Yes.
where you need to go, the wind might push you a little bit more than you want to.
Oh, wow.
And obviously, like, you've got your harness on, you're strapped in and everything like that, and it's like, if you just jostle the controls a little bit, you can it can jolt you a little bit, and I just
Yeah, yeah,
remember
yeah.
one time she just screamed and was, like, ready to just, like, hold on to somebody. It's like, "No, no, no, like, you don't need to be jumping in this space, like, we
Oh,
like,
man.
we're gonna go where we're gonna go," but is that was definitely a fun experience, but going from there, 19 degrees, looking at, like, it's -7 in Chicago. I've never experienced negative, like, 10-degree weather.
-7, wow.
I was like, maybe I just tell them, "Hey, like, can you find me another assignment?" Like, I don't know if I can do it, but of course, like, I made the drive up there, drove a U-Haul truck, like a 22-foot U-Haul truck for the first
You
time.
always have to drive.
Yeah, yeah. That's the whole point of, like, saying you need to move, and this is a long, long way of telling you this is why I bought this the Sleep Number, which was, um, for the first assignment, I tried to do the air mattress. I slept on it maybe for a week or 2, and then it had a hole in it. So then I
Mm.
found out because I'm waking up in the middle of the night with my head on the ground and my legs in the air, and I'm like, "What's going on?" So, like, that didn't work out. So I made the once you finally get paid as, like, being a college student, not making any money, and you see your first paycheck, and you're like, "Oh, wow, like, this is amazing." Of course, you delegate what needs to go to pay off loans and whatnot, but, like, going to, buy a bed, they usually have, like, "Okay, you can try it for 30 days, like,
Mhm.
return, no questions asked," and forget where I went first, otherwise, I would put them on blast if I if I wanted to, because it's like, you go in, you get the bed, it's like, I don't like it. It's too firm. You wanna return it, and then they try to, like, talk you out of it. I'm like, "What are you doing? Like, you said no questions asked. Here's your bed in the same condition I got it." Like, but then the Sleep Number made sense to me because at the time, they had it to where you could break it down into 3 boxes, and it's like
Mm.
I would have my mattress and everything in one box, the box frame in another, and then the other part of the box frame in another. So, it just made moving very easy during those 2 years and then all the years after. So that's why I went on to the long
So
detail of
you've
that
had
story.
you've had a sleep number for a while.
Yeah, yeah. So, like, here
Okay.
recently, the only reason I looked to change it and why I'm trying out this new model is because, my pump went out, and it's like I was initially just wanting to get the pump fixed because that's the whole, um I guess that's part of the technology to the Sleep Number because it's like it's a fancy air mattress in a way to
Yeah,
where
okay.
whatever side of the bed you sleep on, what number you set it to is the firmness or the softness of the bed.
Sure.
And what they did this time around is that, okay, they've upgraded the technology at some point in the 10 years from the time I first got the bed that I got to what they offered me, where it's like, okay, you can control it through your phone, and now it also monitors your sleep, so it can obviously feel the pressure of you on the bed, and then it can measure your breath, your heart rate, and then just, like,
Oh,
how
wow.
restless you are. So it kinda does, like, what the Whoop and those
Fancy
tracking
fancy
thing. Yeah,
upgrade, fancy upgrade.
but I was like, "Wait, okay, I can do this," and it was a decision because it was like I basically was on the phone for like an hour and a half, and this was back a couple months ago when I was relocating to where I'm at now. Like we were kind of talking about real estate, and you're looking at
Yeah.
okay, what's the move? Do you keep renting or do you look at ownership? But then it's like,
Yeah.
if you're going to look at ownership, do the numbers make sense? Like,
Yeah.
I went to a real estate course, and the very basic thing they said is that it's going to be a process for you to find your first property. But also, the number one thing you want to be clear on is like, what does it cost to be you? Like, what is the cost of
It's a great
living your
question.
life? Because then it's like, if you know how much money you make and how much your bills cost, that kind of solves 50 to 90% of your problems. Because then, like they say, money doesn't solve money problems. Like if you find yourself in a hole, or you're like, oh wow, I'm really low right now, and it's like, okay, I'm looking around and I'm thinking, what are the toys or extra things that I have that I don't really need? And it's like, can
Sure.
I return those? Okay, return them. Like, what subscriptions do I have that I don't really need? Can I cancel those? Okay. Like right now, it's not the season to um be bashful or playful or whatnot, but it's like kind of going through life up to this point has been like, okay, like I know what I can do with and what I can do without. And like living a little bit of a nomadic life over the last 10 years, like moving from state to state, going from
Yeah.
Louisiana to Illinois to back to Georgia. It's been that experience gave me a lot of what I wanted coming out of college, because it was like you go to school, and I really like school. Like my nickname growing up has been teacher, kind of like through my family. So it's like I've always had an affinity for teachers or anyone that like
Wow.
teaches, because I'm like, it's just something about being able to take their ideas and their knowledge and communicate it to somebody else. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's really cool.
No, that's man, Ash, you gave me a lot of stuff in there. So first of all, I need to figure out I gotta figure out this sleep number situation.
Yeah.
I've always been curious and didn't know it, but you gave me all the back end on it, which is and man, the pick up and move. So that means you got great memory. You got a lot of great memories
Yeah. Well,
of
that's
people.
yeah.
Wow.
And that's part of the reason, even I guess one of many reasons for doing the podcast is like, as I look at how other people kind of share their stories, obviously we look at things online and we're like, okay, Instagram reels, it's like it's a highlight reel. People show you all the best and all the things like that. So initially I was thinking, well, if I'm like, you talk about niching down, and I've been thinking like, is what I'm doing too vague, too broad, speaking to everyday people, trying to highlight your neighbor essentially, and try
Mhm.
to, I did it right before the 2020 election that started 2019, after like
Okay.
taking a break from work. But I was like, okay, I value talking to people, and I find value in like all the people that I've met. So it would be worthwhile um capturing a part of my life by capturing a part of their life, like your life, and talking to you and figuring out like, okay, who are you? What are you about? And it kind of helps me ask the same questions of myself. And like when I journal and write things down, it's like, okay, like these are the things that are making it more fulfilling. Like when
Sure.
we were talking about my work and what I was doing this week, I'm like, oh, okay. Like now I can answer why it was fulfilling, or like where I found happiness in it. And even when I wasn't happy for a moment, when I felt like I had to get like, I had to tap into that I don't know if I'd say venom, but like just tap into that um things need to get serious right now. And it's not, it's, this isn't time to play. Like I need to be firm. I need to be direct. And doing that, it's like there's some fulfillment there, because it's like that's a sense of growth. Anyone that knows me would say, oh, like Asher's just a quiet, nice guy. And it's like I've had to reevaluate that and be like, no, I can't be nice, because like here are covert contracts that I've created by being nice. Here are things that I'm not saying out loud, but I'm wishing for in my head.
Well,
But
I want to stay there.
yeah,
I want to stay there. Nice guys don't finish last. I'm with the
no.
niceness. I'm
But
with the
it's like
niceness.
with context. Like for instance, like what I'm basing it off of is a book that was given to me by a friend, and even starting to read it back and starting to see what he describes as like the nice guy syndrome. Like when he
Mhm.
started when he started going through it, and I read back through the first chapter, and I was like, I remember how mad I was reading this, like, why would you suggest this to me? Like, this person is detailing, like, all the dark thoughts, all, like, the unspoken things that are just there in black and white ink, and I'm just like, or even listening to it on Audible, I was like, "This can't be real." It's like I thought I was the only one. I thought I knew. I thought I could keep it under wraps, and it's like, "Nope,
Sure.
here's what you're doing." But it's like, here's the bad, but there's also the good. So it's like you don't
Right.
have to stay, like, stuck, you don't have to stay lost, so to speak. It's like there's hope at the end of the tunnel, but it's like there's a process you have to go through or there's a work you can do, and
Mhm.
you don't have to do it all at once. It's not a test. You're not
Sure.
rush pressed for time. It's not like you got to get this done or else your family dies or you got to do this or like it's like this the stakes can be high, but it's like being able to take something on your own terms and kind of try to digest it and get some help while doing it
Mhm.
is helpful in that sense. Maybe if I explain to you the nice guy, like you might look back at it and be like, you can be good. I think there's a difference between being good and being nice, at least in the way that that author describes it.
And with the way that you explained it, I thought about like being your authentic self, being okay with like not thinking the right thing all the time or doing the right thing every time.
Right.
And again, I would take that bait of nice versus good because I don't see. I understand. Then again, then you have this line of pushover, right? So
Mhm.
that's why I'm like, okay, nice versus good. But I understand in context what you're saying. Like, hey, you also use the phrase of, I think you said something about contracts, like not. What did you say? Not
Covert contracts. Like
convert contracts.
basically, it's like you do something without an explicitly stated expectation.
Hmm.
It's like you do something in the hopes of something, but
Sure.
if you would have said, "Hey, I want this, and this is what I'm willing to offer." You may be rejected, but at least you know where things stand. But in like not wanting to face the rejection, someone may just say, "Well, I'll just do this." And maybe they feel like if I'm nice enough, if they recognize my effort, if they recognize this, it's like then I'll get what I want. And it kind of goes back to the corporate thing that we talked about versus entrepreneurship, where it's like people like everyone's story is different, but some principles kind of come through. And of course, like there's no absolutes to anything. But when you see the difference from like someone that's fulfilled, happy, or getting getting back some of what they've put in, it's like, okay, they've learned how to ask for a raise, or they've learned how to know their value or know their worth without saying, I've got to go and start my own thing. Or if they choose to start their own thing, they know what they're doing. They've picked a niche that's relevant enough to them to where it's not a money pit or where they're just wasting their time doing something and then they feel like, oh, I'm a victim and like the world is just doing things to me. But then
Yeah.
all of this kind of ties back to where you started, where it's talking about that internal conflict. And it's like,
Hmm.
are you working to resolve the conflict or are you just letting it pull you apart? And it's like,
Yeah.
I think one of the things that kind of resonated with me was this um it's called it's something TED, and it's like TED is an acronym, basically looking at like, do you have a victim mindset or a victor mindset versus
Yep.
like, okay, if you've been trained, if you've been conditioned in all your life that you're a victim, here's what's been done to you, you've always been oppressed. It's like, yes, there may be truth in those statements, but if they don't do anything to get you from there to where you would like to be, then it kind of leaves you in the state of helplessness where if things are always being done to you that's out of your control, you have no say in when you're going to get out of it. You're always going to be there. You're always going to be stuck. Like forget about it, put your hands up, don't even try. But
That's so good.
if you're given that from a coach, or if you're given that, okay, hey, with what's happened or with the condition in which you're in, you have an opportunity to um redefine the direction in which you want to go. This isn't wishful thinking. This isn't like selling you a course to say, "Oh, you need to buy this in order to do that." This isn't getting you into a MLM or whatever it's pyramid scheme, but
Sure.
it's like, no, actually someone being able to work with you, or you at least having a framework to say, "Okay, here's where I am, here's where I'd like to go. How can I get there?" And it's even if you're making up a bad plan, at least you have a plan that says, here's the direction in which I'm going to go. And
Yeah.
then
Um,
the thing that's there, it's if it doesn't work, you can try something else. You don't have to stay stuck on like, I was given this, I was told this, and that's it. But it's like, it kind of goes back to the conditioning of like, what environment have you been brought into? And like, what have you been told so much to where you either feel stuck there, that's all you know, that's all you're ever going to do, or maybe someone just put this weird idea in my head and now I can get out.
yeah, I think you can make those adjustments. When you talk about we talk about the authentic self and like move. I find that happening a lot in my chosen space of engagement. So I spend a lot of my time working with business owners, service-based business owners, and that victim mindset. I thought that was so good because I was just talking to a guy who picked me, a car service who picked me up from the airport. Naturally, how's business? How's things going? And he hit me with this line, Ashton. It's relevant right now. He's like, man, ever since COVID, I said, sir,
Mhm,
COVID has been 4 years ago. Don't say COVID. Like, tell me how's I'm a consultant. Like,
mhm.
well, everybody does Zoom meetings now. I said, well, sir, and this was a little banter because we had talked a little bit, so he allowed me to kind of go this way. But I was like, because he
Gotcha.
wanted me to give him some free advice, so I was like,
Mhm.
well, hold on, we're not gonna do this for the next 30 to 45 minutes.
Right,
Let's get
right.
to let's get to the brass tacks. And I said, look, I support corporations, and I'm telling you, Mister Sir, people are getting off Zoom calls and they hopping in the plane.
Mhm,
And they need you. And I think your point of victim mentality. So I have a friend of mine who I used to coach with. He had this thing. He's always saying, like, it's on my desk. I wanted to say it.
mhm,
It's happening for you, not to you. And so I think
mhm.
a lot of people have this thing of it happened to me. Like it happened to me
Yeah,
and not as happening for me. And so when we spend time on like the things that are happening, it's happening to everyone.
yeah.
Nobody's excluded. But there are some people who say, I saw that coming. And they
Mhm,
start to move, or people say, I didn't see that happening, but I
mhm.
know there's a way out of this. And I think that speaks to your part of I can make an adjustment on a bad plan.
Yeah.
I can't make an adjustment on no plan at all.
Right, right.
I can't do anything. And I think that part is super important. Again, doesn't matter if it's corporate or entrepreneurship, but that victim thing is so big. I think it also runs parallel with this is another thing that pops up in my world
Mhm,
is, and I don't know if we talked about this before or not, but this, what do I want to use as a word because it's true, epidemic of
mhm.
imposter syndrome.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's rampant and it's popular and it's easy to say like people will claim I'm just got imposter syndrome. Why
Mhm.
are people so quick to just say I got this thing and I'm not working on it.
Yeah.
I got this and I'm not working on it. And most people don't actually have imposter syndrome. They're just lazy.
Mm.
It's an easy thing to say, hey, I got
It
imposter
kinda
syndrome.
hurts a little bit. You hurt my feelings there.
No, I'm not. I'm not talking about you, I don't think. And if
No,
I am, then I'm
I'm
here
thinking
for it.
out loud. I'm thinking out loud because it's funny to me because it's like in just in the past couple of years and even in this last year, it's like being able to receive things in different seasons where like during the winter time it feels like you're in hibernation. You're at least I was in hibernation and reset mode where during the summertime it's like, hey, it's time to play, create, do this, do that. But it all seems to stem back to that mindset and kind of having an idea of what the choices are in front of you, and what it is that you're choosing.
Yep.
And I think I saw this clip where I like to repost a lot of things on Instagram I find interesting and maybe save them to never go back to them again until I see them come back through the timeline.
Sure.
But um, one of the things that was said, this lady is having a conversation with her mentor. And how did she put it? She was basically saying that she's not sure of herself.
Hmm.
And his response to her was like, no, you can't. You can't be unsure of yourself because it's like you're trusting in your unsuredness. Maybe I
Hmm.
may have butchered it, but
No,
it's
I
like
understand. I understand.
it's like you may feel something, but whatever it is that you're feeling, you're putting your trust in that feeling is real.
You're
And it's
empowering that. Yeah.
right, right. And I think that goes back to what you're saying about like the imposter syndrome because that's something that resonated where it was like starting like you graduate from a good school, you get a good job, and then when you're in the room with other people, instead of looking at the opportunity, I started to compare myself to other people and I started to think of, oh, I don't have what they have. I stopped focusing on what I did have and I just kept looking at, oh, I don't have that. I don't have that. Maybe I don't belong here. And then it's like I slowly started to shrink, 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 shrink,
Yep.
shrink.
Yep. Yep. But again, that's not to just Asher, because I would say I think we all have moments of insecurity,
Mhm,
but there's a difference from the insecurity to the imposter syndrome, which I
mhm,
think is fake. But I believe, to your point, when we think about ourselves in those environments and we're looking around,
mhm,
what really was the goal?
mhm.
Why were we there? What we were there? What are we there to do?
Yeah.
And so we have lost focus on what was the goal. Like, what was the purpose of us being in that room, whether we were invited in that room or
Mhm,
we just happened to step into that room or that space, whatever it may be. We lost sight. And again, I didn't even ask you if this was a biblical live podcast. But when he stepped off that boat and he stopped looking at Jesus, he went down. And
Yeah.
so you got to stay focused
Mhm,
on the thing. And we forget. So again, I'm just all I can do is just talk about what I do, right? So,
yeah.
I worked heavily in corporate space for a while personally, and then started to mentor and coach folks in that space to like either double down on what they were doing or to kind of get out. And that evolved into me doing like just specifically working with service-based businesses.
Mhm,
But one of the things that I always came across was I would meet amazing people. I
mhm,
just would meet a lot of amazing people who didn't know they were amazing. Like
mhm,
you just imagine walking down the beach and you would prick your foot and then you thought, oh, it's a rock. You're like,
mhm.
it's a diamond. What is this diamond doing on the beach?
Yeah.
And that happening all the time. Like
Wow.
so much I had to like develop like a program or a system to like help these folks like get the dirt or the sand off of them and
Mhm,
then make them standing up something that had reflection so they can actually see themselves.
mhm,
And because you can't go not really well if you don't take the time to say, I'm a diamond or I'm
mhm,
a rock. It doesn't matter
mhm.
what you are. So
Yeah.
I'm this.
Yeah.
And this is okay. Like if
Right,
you don't
right.
spend that time to do that, then it's going to be a repeated failure to launch.
Yeah.
It won't be full strength. And you need full strength when self-doubt comes in because we all have self-doubt.
Yeah.
But if you already are limping along to the story about the mentor, and then you have self-doubt, it will take you out. Like it just will make us stand there way too long. And now we look up like, gosh, I've missed the bus now. Now I got
Yeah.
to run to the next stop.
Yeah.
Like that can't be the case. But that whole thought of victim versus victor, I think, is a great point, and it shows up in day by day. I think that's kind of one of the things that that drives my passion or my purpose, excuse me, is
Mhm,
that I don't like seeing people or meeting people who don't recognize the greatness that is in them, and someone else has saw that greatness and they are abusing it.
mhm.
They are pushing them down. They're like, this. man, this guy doesn't know he's a diamond. I'm gonna keep telling
Right.
him he's a seashell. Like that bugs me the heck out of me because I'm like, look, yo, you got to keep doing what you're doing, and this is not necessarily work related. It's just it can be relationship wise.
Yeah.
Like, please look inside and see what you are. And again, I think that's something that happens as we get older, we just forget. We get further away from who we truly are. And again, when you think about when you're a child, you're the most adventurous, you're the
Mhm.
most confident. They call it terrible twos, but it wasn't terrible two. It's like two know what to do. Like number
Mhm.
two, like when you was two, you were like, I would jump off the couch. You didn't care about the floor. You were going. It
Yeah.
was there, you're going to eat it. You didn't care about a germ. You have
Mhm.
way more self-confidence at that age. But as we get older,
Mhm.
we get further away from who we are, and then we
Mhm.
don't remember or don't re-meet ourselves until we're in our 50s, right? To our 40s. And now we want to get it going. So
Right.
that's full circle, like my world. And so I love these talks because it is a journey of self-discovery. And can you do it by yourself? Yeah, 100%. But most of us are not disciplined enough to do it because once it hurts,
Mhm.
you don't want to touch it anymore.
Right.
Not like, hold on, I don't like where that feels. No way. I'll be back there in a week, in a year.
Yeah.
I'll come back to that spot. But if you have the finances or the friends that continue to push on that, understanding that they're not there to harm you, then you
Mhm.
allow them to keep pushing it and get all the pus out of it. Ooh, that's a
Mhm.
good analogy to for it to start healing. But we're afraid to squeeze
Mhm.
and get that disease and infection out there so it can start back to heal.
That
So
is a good analogy. Very vivid. But
you had a moment when I had a moment. I'm like, oh gosh, gotta squeeze this out of here, and
yeah.
it hurts. I think I stubbed my toe one time and I cut it. I'm like, oh gosh, I gotta squeeze it, and it made me cry. But
Yeah. Yeah, those moments will make you cry. It's definitely make a grown man cry. But
Mhm.
I guess to be where we're at now, could you help me understand how you came to be like what was how did you grow up?
That's a great question. I found myself in a Burlington coat factory.
Mm.
It's a clothing store where you buy, they call it Burlington Coat Factory, but they got regular clothes.
Mhm.
It might have been early 2000s, I'm gonna say.
Mhm.
And there was a friend of mine who her and her husband, they were into film and production, and she would call all the time. What's so weird is that we weren't really close in school, but
Mhm.
we figured out a way to connect after school, and we just good people.
Mhm.
And one day she called me like, "Hey, I'm trying to figure out this thing, and you're so good with advice, da da da." And so she said something to me that I had never heard in my life. And I want to say I'm in my 20s, 30s, maybe early, late 20s, early 30s. And she said, "You know what, Ty, you are a genius." And it hit me the wrong way, Asher,
Uh-oh.
the wrong way.
What's the wrong way?
Um, and it made me, I couldn't, I was moving. It just stuck with me.
Mhm.
what do and it made me reflect. And I had to keep reflecting. And I'm like, why did she say that in that moment? And I started then having encounters right after each other on the area that I was naturally gifted in, which was with people and providing clarity. And they just
Mhm.
started coming in like a flood. And so I still was working corporate, but I was noticing and paying more attention to my encounters and how people were using my gift, how people were coming to my tree and
Mhm.
picking the apple and leaving. And that was okay because I would grow another apple. But I
Mhm.
started paying attention to what people were coming to pick off my tree. And then once I realized it, I said, hey, hold on for a second. Maybe I could offer this for a few dollars possibly.
Mhm.
And I did. And it wasn't a lot in the beginning because I did it because I was fulfilled by it.
Mhm.
And I started to see it show up everywhere in everything that I did, no matter what work I was doing, no matter where it may be. I found it. So when
Mhm.
somebody says, I'm looking for my purpose, I don't know what to do, I challenge you that you're actually using it today. You're just not recognizing it.
Mhm.
It's something that my son has said, Kai. He said, Dad, you know something that's funny? I said, what? Your nose is always there, but you never see it. I believe that's your purpose. It's always there, but you never see it. It's
Mhm.
you're using it in this moment. And the
Mhm.
moment we start seeing our nose, then we can accelerate, we can go. So that's when I grew up. So once that happened, I started having encounters with individuals and start paying attention. And then I started getting to a place of clarity with it. And if I could be supremely honest, up until last year, I didn't get to a straightaway with it. So I
Mhm,
was working it, I was working it, I was working it, and I was working it. And I found myself in this conflict of passion versus purpose. I
mhm,
told you passionately, I love art, I love photography, I love media, and that side of the world. And that showing up typically in a corporate setting. I love like coaching and so forth. And then purpose wise, I was like helping people see themselves. And these things were not on the same path, and by chance they collided, and
mhm,
I never allowed them to release. They came together for 1 second, Asher, and I
mhm,
never allowed them to release. And I started to build on that, and which has found me to be working in the field that I'm working in now from a coaching standpoint. I coach and I work in the corporate sector as a communication and change management expert,
mhm,
and that has provided me now the opportunity that I can start working with service-based business owners and entrepreneurs so they can kind of find their groove again. So
mhm.
long answer, but I'm hoping something you found it in there.
Yeah, and I guess I think I also meant, like, where did you grow up as a little boy, like that 2-year-old? What was that life like?
Oh, you mean naturally what was my story?
Yeah,
Being
yeah.
oh, so born in Georgia,
Mhm,
um, traveled across, was part of like military a little bit. So Texas, uh, Sacramento, California. So those three spots, but primarily Georgia.
mhm.
Yeah, Decatur, Georgia, to be more exact.
Okay, Atlanta.
And so I've been in Georgia my whole life, lived in a few different spots. But yeah, I'm a what they say is a rare find in Georgia to meet somebody from Georgia. A lot of people say that.
Mhm,
But yeah, I'm not a transplant. Transplant.
gotcha. So, I guess, like, when you were growing up, like, being from Georgia, growing up in Georgia, and, like, I guess what was that like? Are the things that you're doing now, were they ever in your wildest dreams? Or, like, what were you dreaming of as a little boy?
No, that's so great. Younger, I don't think I had any aspirations other than just growing up and having fun. As we're talking a
Mhm.
young child.
Yeah.
And then if I can remember my earliest, I'm going to be that when I grow up.
Mhm.
I said I was going to be an arbitrator. I don't know how I got a hold of that word. But my earliest memory of I want to be something, it was to
Yeah.
be an arbitrator.
Wow.
And
What is an arbitrator?
is someone that works with governments and negotiates and brings clarity in situations, brings peace. So if you have a contract dispute right now in your job, they probably have it in your contract that you won't take them to a real lawyer, that you allow their arbitrator to try to solve it first.
Man, that is a dream.
Yeah. So I am that. I actually, and again, this is so I never thought about it to this moment. So thank you, Asher. I actually am working in my gift, not in a legal capacity, but I help folks arbitrate the brainstorm that's in their mind with themselves
Mhm.
to get to the point of one. So wow, thank you. Thank you for that gift. I appreciate that. I never
You're
thought about that to this
you're
moment.
welcome.
Wow. Wow,
Wow.
that's amazing. That's
That
just
is
made the rest of my weekend. I really my most
That's
earliest moment. Wow, thank you. Ask another question. That was great.
well, that's awesome. Well, maybe I'll filibuster for a second while the questions ponder in my mind. But something a
Wow.
coach of mine says that I always try to repeat to myself as a mantra is that if there's anything for me to say or do, God will reveal it to me in an instant. So, in trusting that, I'm learning to take more pauses and to do nothing. And like today, some people celebrate Saturday as the Sabbath, some people do Sunday, but actually recently learning what Sabbath mean and what it's about. It's that it's created for man to rest and not
Mhm.
it's not something that God did for himself, but it's like an example of saying, "Hey, okay, I'm all powerful, I'm all knowing, I'm all these things, but giving this to a people that have been enslaved, to a people that have been just sun up to sundown, work, 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 make bricks, make bricks. It's like, no, I call you to do nothing, to rest, to appreciate what is, what's already been made, what's already been done. So
That's good.
being able to find peace in nothingness is it's interesting because obviously the world that we live in, being in America, being in any part of the world, it's like you're driven by how are you going to make your next meal? how are you going to I guess how would some people say get the next lick, like whether it's your food, provide for your family, get the new clothes, like whatever it is, there's always like a storm, a whirlwind of like
Sure.
this, that, and the other. And it's like finally being at a place where certain things kind of sit with you. Like you said earlier, you weren't sure if this was like a biblical podcast or something like that. I'm like, I'm not really in some cases I'm thinking I'm not really quantifying it because what I'm trying to do is be holistically yourself. Like it's your time. It's just you do you. Like sometimes it might be topical, other times it may not be, but
Sure.
something that was kind of a revelation to me. I think it was last weekend. I drove down to Jacksonville and Florida.
Hmm.
And I've been doing this thing to where it's like, okay, one weekend I'll record and then the next weekend I'll just leave it open to be like,
Sure.
okay, whatever it is that I want to do, I'll go do it. If it's work around the house or if it's just make a quick trip to a local town and check it out, I'll do that. And I listened to this book. It's called the maybe I listened to like 10 or 15 minutes of it. It's the one page marketing plan. And it's literally a page where it has three sections with three sections. So it's basically a grid with nine
Hmm.
squares. And it starts with the ultimate question that all coaches ask is like, who are you? Like, what is
Hmm.
your target market, your niche? And
Yep.
I'm sitting there thinking to myself, how many times do I have to hear the same question? And then
Sure.
the same question starts with Patrick Bet David, where he wrote that book, Your Next Five Moves.
Yep.
And the first move is, who are you? And it's the
Yep.
same question that I ask people when they come on the podcast. Who do
Sure.
you say you are? In a
Yep.
sense of like, um, are you spending enough time with yourself to know what it is that you're about? Or it's like, have you let too much of the noise of the world get into your mind and kind of like infect what was kind of natural to you or what came to you and you were like, hey, I want to be an arbitrator. And it's like that's awesome.
That was good. That's really, really good. Who are you? That is definitely an important question.
It can find like it can feel like an interrogation. Otherwise, it's just like it takes me back to that scene from the original Black Panther movie and like that between Chadwick Boseman and Michael B. Jordan, where
Yep.
they bring him in and he's just like one of the elders ask him, "Who are you?" And he
Who
speaks in
are
his
you?
natural tongue, and I was like, "Ooh," and that made my heart jump a couple beats.
Yeah, that thought of that anxiety from and another time. I wonder, man, this is left field, but does it bother you at a different degree if you're not solid on it?
Are you asking me?
No, just in
Oh,
general, just in general, like because again, if you're following that journey where you hear it so many times,
mm,
like is it like okay, I figured this out, or like I don't really know, so let's move on. I've heard it.
yeah.
I'm still working on it.
Right, right, right.
But it's an important place to start before you start to talk to somebody to kind of see well, what do you think what do you think this is to be, or what do you think you are? That's I mean, it's just pretty on point.
Gotcha.
Yes. There's a certain few questions that you got to ask every time
Mhm.
before you start making your declarations or proclamation or whatever it is. You got to
Yeah.
find out, well, okay, let's see how far apart are we,
Mhm.
which is
Well,
good.
I mean, to your point, and something that's kind of encouraging is that, like being able to seek out certain things that speak to me or things that you want to see more of. It's good to see that what's for you kind of comes back to you. Things that you thought you may have lost in childhood, like starts
Sure.
to come back, and sometimes it comes with like another saying my coach would say, or another coin that my another saying that my coach says is that ships come in over calm seas. And it's that sometimes when you feel that the anxiety or the pressure of like, I've got to do, I've got to do, I've got to do, it's like learning to set some things down and to get quiet and to get still and to hear what what matters or what's that one thing you need to do instead of like these five priorities that you've kind of told yourself need to be done, or you're working to somebody else's deadline, it's like, okay, like when that all goes away, like what's really important or what really matters? And when you ask that question to yourself and you give yourself the time to listen and to hear back what the answer is, it may be the simplest thing, or it may be something to be like, okay, I either need to do this, do nothing, or stop doing something else. And then kind of getting over that fear or making the decision and finding the peace that comes with it or that follows it. It's just like, wow, like maybe you beat yourself up with like, that was it. It was just that. That's all I had to do. But then after a while, it's like
Yeah.
when you reflect on it, maybe years later, you're like, wow, I'm glad it was that and it wasn't more. And it wasn't like, oh my God, like,
Let me ask you this then. For me,
mhm,
I found that when I was the most lost as it relates to like personally, and I was trying to listen and do all these things, I was making major adjustments.
mhm.
And where I found solace or found it to be, it was micro adjustments. It was like I actually, actually when that either I was going way right or way
Yeah.
left, where all I
Mhm.
needed to do was just take a little micro hair of a movement, and I was about lined up for me personally. How about have you? Do you have anything similar, or are you one that
Yeah.
says I had to make big changes?
Well, I agree with you in a couple of ways because I'll say kind of going back to a theme we touched on earlier, just getting a job out of college was initially I had a co-op and I liked the co-op the first time because it is having that mindset of like, oh, you get to participate. But then once you start talking to your classmates and you seeing like, oh, what's everybody else's experience like? And then you do a little bit of that comparison where it's, man, I'm putting in all this work. I'm traveling from Atlanta to South Georgia to here to there. And it's like I'm enjoying my experience, but then I'm questioning what what does this ultimately have to do with what I'm learning? Like I was doing
Oh, that's good.
non-destructive testing, which is like you do a couple of different methods where you're looking for flaws in metals
Okay.
specifically around welds, or like people do it for Six Flags, they've got to inspect their welds, or they'll do it for storage tanks and things like that. And obviously it didn't become clear that that was worth something until I'm like, oh, this like you got to you not only build something, but you've got to have like a maintenance schedule. Like somebody's got to come in and be like, okay, hey, this has a certain life cycle. Like some things it's like it made sense, but essentially what I saw needed to change was that the job I was doing wasn't going to help me get further because it
Sure.
was like basically me working in the world that I was working, I was able to communicate with somebody else that I played ultimate frisbee with, and he was in the engineering role, still doing co-op work, but he could talk to other engineers that were full-time hires. And basically, he told me that, okay, if you don't want to work here full time because you're going to be capped. Like if you're going to be coming out of school as an engineer, you're going to be making maybe like $55,000 a year. And to a broke college student, maybe that sounds good, but it's like that's all you're going to make for 5, 10 years, 15 years. You're never going to
Yeah.
go up. Like there's other opportunities for you other places. And it's like I saw an example of what he was telling me by doing 3 semesters with the same company. And it's like it wasn't until the last semester when I got the nerve to ask, "Hey, can I get a pay raise from like $11 to $13?" And I'm all the while talking to my friends where like they're making 14, 15, and they're sitting in
Sure.
AC, like playing on CAD, doing things like
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
minutes to get paid for hours. And I'm like, okay, something has to change with my approach. And in this
Sure.
case, I had to make a drastic change to be like, okay, I'm going to a career fair every fall semester, every spring semester, or every summer semester, or every other. And like you're saying, I'm in college for 5.5 years. In four
Mhm.
years, I haven't had another opportunity to say, okay, well, I've committed to this one, but
Sure.
and even just putting myself out there like you would for a job or this or that, it's like there hasn't been any. reciprocity to say, "Hey, like, we'd like to interview you or we'd like to give you an offer." It's like, that wasn't there. So,
Yeah,
like, looking at somebody else that had success every summer, like, for 3 summers that I knew her, it was like she had a different job with the exact company that she wanted to have it with, and I did a micro step, which was asking her, "Hey, how are you able to do this? Can you show me?" And she gave me documents to say, "Hey, here are questions that interviewers ask, and here's how you prepare." And also asking another friend from the same frisbee team, "Do you know anyone that's good in career, like to help with jobs and things like that?" He's like, "Yeah, my mom knows someone, and you can sit down and have an interview with him." And
sure.
he showed me basically 80 to 90% of the jobs that you look that are posted online, those are already filled by somebody like internally. And it's like
Yeah,
it goes back to that expression of it's important who you know, not what you know. And also
yeah,
being able to do a reverse interview to ask the people that are wanting to fill the role. It's like, okay, why do you need this role? Feel like what is it about? Like, what are your needs? Like, what is it that you're looking for? And
yeah,
just saying that there's a power dynamic in you're not just going to someone begging for a job or you're not like for some reason this imagery always comes to my mind where I'm like going to a career fair sometimes if you don't have the right information you basically feel like a hooker that's hanging out on the street corner hoping to get picked up and then you're going to be turning tricks to be like oh like you turn tricks you get paid money and that's
yeah.
essentially what you do but it's like if you
$5. Yeah,
understand the power that you have as an employee and what you bring as an asset, not just for your time, but for the value that you have, the way that you can think critically, the way that you can tackle situations and bring in a different perspective. It's like, hey, they need me as much as I need them. And
yeah.
it's a mutual exchange. So it's like
More.
making that micro shift of asking someone that I saw had success better than I did helped me to make the major shift in saying, okay, I've got to completely change my strategy. But still, it was like, to your point, it was small things that I had to do. And it's like I spent time in doing those smaller things in a major way. And that's what ultimately gave me the experience to be able to land the job between 2 semesters of talking with the same company and then getting a chance to travel out of state to start work, go around, and come back.
Ash, I already knew that you were a good guy, but man, you're pretty dope. I've learned so much more, like perspective, man. So that's humbleness to ask someone, hey, what are you doing over there? Like, man, that takes a lot, especially I mean, and I don't know friend groups, but again, a lot of times that does not happen. Like,
Yeah.
especially if someone is perceived that they're really got it going on, to
Yeah.
then say, hey, how are you doing that? That
Yeah.
takes a different level of vulnerability, right?
Yeah.
And trust that they're not going to stomp on you or talk behind your back or something like that. Man, that's
Yeah.
wow.
Well, I
Just
mean, to your point, it's like just being able to articulate this now, it's it's kind of freeing. And some of it I feel like I have known, but I haven't put the time and focused on it because I've either been preoccupied or distracted by other things. And it's like um so much of my time in school was spent kind of going back to the nice guy syndrome is like I spent a lot of time maybe I don't know if it was like the Christian background or just like it's a certain mentality where you're so focused on not being yourself, but like you're trying to please enough people to be accepted in the group. And it's like growing up as an outsider coming to the US as an immigrant, it's like you're kind of rejected by some people and accepted by some. And it's like sometimes you can be accepted for being yourself and finding your right group of people, or you can play a caricature or a character where it's like, oh, if I'm this milk toast, like nothing going wrong, because like you see where they say like the tall poppy seed syndrome, the people that stand out, they kind of get smacked on the head, they cut down and be like, nope. We don't need anything different. We need you in school. We need you guys to be like this. Like, we need you to be squares. We need you to be workers. We're making workers. We're making workers. But it's like
Sure.
having an affinity for teachers. I always liked the teachers that they were themselves and they taught in a way to where it was encouraging. It was fun to go to class. It was nice to be like, okay, maybe I didn't do that well in high school physics, but our physics professor, Mr. Chenard, he was always excited about what it was he was doing. And I think he taught calculus as well. And it was like, those are classes I had to retake in college because I didn't do well on the AP class. But it's
Yeah.
like, that's something that I had to like make peace with in my late 20s, early 30s, or early 20s. Like, it's part of that imposter syndrome where it's like, on
Yeah.
the one hand, I'm trying to present a B student honor roll, and it's like, yeah, I made those things at times, but it's like I spent a lot of time hiding away my mistakes. But now seeing that, hey, when you show your mistakes, even in recording, it's like I don't do any editing because I'm like trying to break away from that um having to be perfect. And it's like you don't get far trying to like fit someone's image of perfect, where it's like that's not me. That's just not me. And it's like I kept trying to paint this picture of like, maybe they'll like me if I'm like this. Maybe they'll like me if I'm like that. And it's like,
Yeah.
people don't necessarily have to like you, but I think they can appreciate what it is that you bring, who it is that you are, if they're ready for that version of you. If they're not, you're still okay. You're not less than because you weren't accepted by the popular people that you tried to spend so much time and be in the good graces. It's like they've got their own thing. They got to where they are, however they got there. But it's like you being in their in circle or killing yourself to be there can
That's so good.
break you. And it's like if it breaks you, that sucks. And that's the thing that so many kids struggle with growing up. And it's like we become adults that struggle with that. And like it just keeps going and keeps going and it keeps going until you see people like yourself, like a Gary V, like an ET, that break out and they're like, no, I'm gonna do me, because people need to see real people and not just like whatever matrix it is or whatever, like, hey, and this, it's like we're in an election season, so you got things kind of buttoned up, and like I like to poke the bear sometimes, but I'm gonna leave that alone. It's just like
No, that's good.
it's just
The no
it's
edit is
hilarious,
good.
but
That's so
it's
good.
so freeing just being like, I'm not playing the game anymore. I'm gonna be myself, and I'm gonna do it in a way to where I'm still going to be respectful. I'm going to follow the law. I'm not going to break the law or just go
Yeah.
out of my way to be an a-hole or whatnot. But I'm going to be more of me and learn to take up space that I exist to. It's not just being around people that are narcissistic, that like every time they enter the room, everything's got to be about them. Everything's got to be focused about them. It's like, okay, like, cool. I'm getting out of that room. I'm gonna go stand outside for a minute and just like chill and take a breath.
No, that's a good, that's, I mean, that's so good because, and I agree. So, like, there's times where you're not being yourself, me included, whoever, because of a group or whatever.
Mhm.
So you always say, you know, you tell a lie, you to cover up a lie, right? So same thing, like you go to like not be yourself, and then you find yourself in a situation like, I actually don't want to do that. I don't agree, but I'm so far away from the island now. I'm on
Yeah.
the boat, and now I gotta let go. And now you're bothered because why didn't I just not tell them I don't like boats?
Right.
I don't like water. And again, I think it's that social pressure. I want to say corporate, that social pressure that like I have to get along with everybody.
Mm.
Like there are some people. I got a quick story. So at one point in
Yeah.
time, I was a leader in corporate America. I had a sales team.
Mhm.
Actually, this is so funny. Every day I used to send out. There was this guy who did this blog. It would be like positive quotes every day.
Mhm.
It was just like positive about birds or trees. It would be something every day.
Mhm.
And so I used to send it to the whole organization every
Mhm.
day. When I tell you there was no way for you to be angry about this message, Like it's no way. Like, good morning, have a great day. The sun
Mhm.
is blue or green, orange, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, it was those type of things. And when I tell you the amount of people who would send me a message and be like, could you please remove me from the list?
Yeah.
What? Like, me and that person probably will never get along because they find anger and frustration from a simple message that says, have a great day.
Mhm.
There's a group of people that get bothered by that type of interaction. And me and that person can be cordial. We can work together. We can do things together, but we probably would not hang out because
Mhm.
they don't see the best. And I think that's okay. I think
Yeah.
that's completely okay. But there is a social pressure that, hey, everybody needs to get along. Everybody needs to be friends and we should all dance and kumbaya. And that ain't necessarily the case. Like, we can get along and be okay. You can vote this way. I can vote that way. And we can still go out
Yeah.
and hang out. And I think, to your point, it's so important to just be yourself and then be okay with it regardless of what happens. So when you said the no, when I had to write it down, you was like, man, I only do edits. I was like, man, that is, in life you don't get to edit. Like,
Yeah.
listen, man, I tripped over that rock back there and I'm embarrassed all outdoors, but I did trip.
Yeah.
Like, it did happen. But we're in this world now that you actually can cover it up with a
Yeah.
filter or with makeup, or you can edit. Like,
Yeah.
that's not
It's
real
crossed my
life.
mind a couple of times, but it's like sometimes when you gotta remind yourself why it is that you're doing what you're doing, it's like, oh yeah, like just being able to check in with the people that do help me do like the audio edit, like work
Yeah,
with Donald the voice and Christina that helps me make the short video clips, just putting the
yeah,
words over it has
sure.
been cool because working with them over a 5-year period and just receiving the encouragement from them from times where I was like, as soon as I started, I was like, the pandemic hit and I was just a lot of things were moving and I was trying to do too many things and it almost felt like why did I even bother? Like what was I thinking? Like having this
Yeah,
dream, this goal, this like why was this a thing? But then being able to check in with them and them being maybe a little bit older than me, but just having the positive feedback to be like, "Oh yeah, I like that you did this," and like, "I like this about you," and just being like, "Oh, okay, like maybe I've just been focused on too much of the wrong things that I misinterpreted one negative thing that someone said to me and I took it as, oh, like this person always thinks this bad of me. And it's like, no,
yeah.
I maybe caught them on a bad day and maybe they lashed out and that's not like the totality of who they are or what they're about.
Yeah, I think the corporate is, man, you gotta be perfect, you gotta be perfect, you gotta be perfect. And sometimes we got caught in that cycle of perfection. And I think it's okay to strive to be perfect, but understand it's not obtainable. Like, you can't get there, but it's
Mhm.
okay to want to have things to be tidy. And when I think about life and the business or any of these things, if we really look at it, it actually starts at your first failure.
Mhm.
That's actually, it ain't like your first win. If you win the first time you do something, there was nothing learned. You didn't learn
Yeah.
it. You think you actually did it right.
Right.
And that is not the thing. And I think that's what we have allowed. Again, I'll say, like, Hollywood or the news, because these are the places that we internalize these images that we see. But if we were to give everybody one day a year that you had to behave and speak how you are in your home, I bet
Mhm.
that'd be an interesting day. One day a year, and you got to the same language you speak, whatever you wear, the way how you act at home. You got to do that for one day. That'd probably be the best day every year. Man, just think.
You might be creating a purge day there.
Well, no, not purge, not purge, not purge, not purge. No, personality day. Like, we're gonna call
Okay, okay.
be you day. We're gonna be you day.
Yeah,
Like, listen, no judgment. No matter what happened on Monday, be you day. You cannot count it against this person on Tuesday.
okay,
And
I
not
like
we're
that,
not
I
talking
like
about
that.
purge. We're talking about, like, hey, you know what? I actually wear my shoes backwards. That's because that's what I like to do. I actually
Mhm.
don't cut my hair out. Like, whatever that thing may be, just
Yeah,
without the pressures and anxiety of, like, man, I got to get it right all the
mhm,
time.
yeah.
the freeness of it. So, man, let me
I
make sure
like
we
that.
clarity. I am not asking for a
Thank you
purge
for
day.
bringing back the positive. Thank you
I'm
for
not asking
keeping
for
me
a
on track.
purge day. I've never seen that movie, but I know what it's about.
I think I saw one of them. They made a whole bunch, and it's like, ooh, once you open up that Pandora's box, it's like,
I'm not
things
interested in
things
that.
go a little wild.
I'm actually looking for a happy day. That's what I'm going to call it. This is my campaign speech for Happy Day, National Happy Day, No Judgment Day. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know.
I appreciate that. I can co-sign that. I'll co-sign that.
All right, we got our first sponsor. It's My Time Podcast is official sponsor of Be Happy Day.
Well, it's funny because that's my name means happy, and it's
Really?
yeah, that's what Asher stands for. It's one of the
Oh,
12 tribes of Jacob.
we got something going on here. All right, so you got your marching orders. You gotta figure out
Well,
this happy day.
I mean, I'll see what I can do. We'll mull it over. But it's like, are you familiar with the movie Inside Out?
So I've not watched it, but I've heard some interviews about it. I know my kids have watched it a few times, but it's dealing with your mental, the different personalities of
Mm,
emotions that are going on within your
yeah,
body. Is that something?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And it's like, I think they made one 10 years ago, and then they just recently this year they made the second one.
Okay.
And I watched most of it. I think I maybe fell asleep during like a middle part, but I woke up
Sure.
during the main event, so to speak. But one of the reasons I think that movie resonates so much with me is that one of the main characters is Joy, and Joy,
Mm,
maybe it's different from happiness, or the kind of, it seems synonymous, but just seeing how you try and you try so hard to control things, or you think things have to be one way, but seeing
mm,
how they really do a great job of storytelling, and it's it's just, I like seeing when people are able to like tell you something and show you with great detail, and like you kind of fill in the blanks, you bring in your own personal experience, and it's just like, man, like I went with some family friends to see the second one, and I felt like a little kid, but at the same time I felt like I was so excited to see it, and then in seeing it and as it was wrapping up, I was crying, but I was crying tears of joy. And it was just like a
I'm
friend
going to
looked
see
over
it.
at me as we like, "Are you crying?" I'm like, "Yeah." And it's like it feels good that I can cry and just let this out and be around other people that don't necessarily judge you for crying. And it's like, yeah, like what's going on right there on that screen, that's where my mind was at 8 months ago. That's where my mind was at in January. And being able to like let go of that thing and be like, "Oh yeah, I guess I do have some control of my emotions." And then
So good.
in learning to control them or experience them, not necessarily having to like hold on to something for so long, it's like, oh yeah, this too shall pass. Like this joy, it might be here, it might go. Like the sadness might be here, it might go. This anger might be here, it might go. But it's like I don't need to carry it from today to tomorrow till, hey, do you know what happened here? Do you know what happened there? Like I kind of told you the story about like um yesterday, and kind
Yeah.
of like what my week was like. But at this point, I've made peace with what was, and I've kind of carried forward the lesson. And the beautiful thing that I appreciated about that was that I think I matured enough to apologize where I felt I was wrong, and hopefully leave the guys that I was working with on a better note than where we started. And to be like, okay, if I have the opportunity to work with them again, I'm gonna make the best of it. And regardless, it's like if somebody's cutting me off in traffic or whatever, it's like, what did they say recently? It's like, don't attribute to malice what can be seen as just ignorance. Like people go through life doing whatever it is that they do without me in consideration. It's like they could be
Mhm.
going through who knows what, and then it
Sure.
might just catch me at the wrong time. But if
Yeah.
I'm sitting here thinking, oh, this person did this to me and they went out of their way to do this, it's like they could be going through God knows what. But it's like
That
it's got
part.
nothing to do with me.
I believe that wholeheartedly. I believe that most people that we are mad at or mad at us. Have you ever had someone that was mad at you, or you thought were mad at, that was mad at you, and then you talked to them, they were like, I didn't even know you thought I was mad at you. Like I didn't even know. Like I'm talking about
Feel so
years. I've
embarrassed, and
had
it's
that. I
just
don't know. I've
like,
had that a lot. They're
oh
like, I didn't
man.
even know that. I didn't even know you were mad. I thought you just was busy working. I'm like, no, I thought you were. And that tells. I mean, and that I've heard that narrative a lot, and that says that, you know what, Asher? Ty is in his own world, working his life, trying to figure
Yeah.
it out. It's so many of these. That guy didn't even speak to me. He actually didn't hear a thing that you said. He was thinking about that the dog just didn't eat today.
Yeah.
And so I think we have so many of those scenarios where we are so consumed in thinking that somebody is treating us wrong or ignoring us or running over us, when everybody has got all these plates spinning and they're
Mm.
just trying to keep it going. And
Yeah.
every now and then they'll bump into you and you think it was about you, but it was like, hey, I actually was just trying to make sure that middle plate didn't fall.
Mm.
And I think it's that. I think we're not communicating the way we need to communicate because we're being hypersensitive and not thinking that somebody else has something else going on. Like I'm the only person in the world.
Yeah.
Ty Card has the only. I'm the only one that has 3 kids and a wife and 2 dogs that I got
Yeah.
to feed, and like nobody else has those type of scenarios. Everybody else just has the perfect life, and that's just not true. I
Yeah.
think we have to make sure that we give grace. Like
Mm.
I'm big on grace. Like when somebody offends me, my first thought is, I wonder what caused that. Not like
Mm.
he was trying to get me or she was trying
Right.
to get,
Right.
like, man, I wonder they're okay. And I will double check before I get offended. So I
Mm.
will get offended. But let me, hey, did you mean to step on my foot? Oh, hey, did you hear me? I said hello. And most times the reply is, oh, no, I didn't mean to do that. Oh, I didn't even hear you. And I have saved an Incredible Hulk moment. Like I didn't have to turn green. I could just like be cool about it.
Yeah.
And I don't think because we're so busy, I don't think that happens enough in our lives where we take a moment and say, well, let me just think grace first.
Yeah.
And we just react. I mean, I think sometimes reactions are necessary because we're humans, but when it can lead to something that's major, I think that's a thing too. We don't necessarily know the breadth or the gravity of a situation where, like, hey, if this is not addressed now,
Mm.
I may not see Asher again for 6 months. It's going to fester,
Yeah.
and we're both going to be upset about it, or I'm going to be upset about it. He's
Yeah.
not going to know. And by the time that we meet again, I might not even mention anything because I'm still so upset. So
Mm.
let me address it in this moment right now before it starts to build. I mean, I think it takes an awareness to do that. So I'm really big into those things.
Yeah. That's a great point.
Yeah.
And I guess that kind of goes to even touch lightly on how we met through the prayer line, and how you hear men share their stories or just touch on what it is that's going on with their life, and you're sitting there thinking it's like, oh man, I'm glad somebody spoke up. And it's like, I thought I was out here on my lonesome, and it's like, oh, you too. And it's like, oh, I can talk about it, okay. And
It's
it's like,
okay.
oh man, okay. Like
Yeah, that
for
part is the pressure.
Yeah, for me recently, it's even been okay with, like, not having to be, like, present daily or, like, constantly doing dealing with something, because I'm, like, with work, obviously trying to compartmentalize things and be like, "Okay, work's gotta stay at work," and, like, trying to problem solve high level problems or, like, complex problems where you're dealing with people and people's emotions and, deadlines that need to be met and things like that. I'm like, I like the challenge of that, but I I don't want that in my head 24/7. And it's like if I go from that to dealing with myself personally, and it's like every time I get on a call or something, I don't want to be like, I don't want to self-assess myself every every conversation I have. It's like that's exhausting after a while. And it's like
Yeah.
feeling like you're not doing enough if you constantly comparing yourself over and over to others. Like that's one of the things that burnt me out very quickly. And that's one of the things that kind of it's an indicator, like, to show me, yeah, I need to back off of this, or I need to stop, look at what's in my hand or what's around me, and
Yeah, that's
start
good.
calling out things where it's like, okay, I see a bed there, ring light, TV, desk. Like, I guess some people may say it's like a grounding technique, but looking at what's right here in front of me, and is this important, or is whatever else going on, can it wait, or can it be like put down for a minute? It's like, okay, maybe I don't need to carry this, or maybe I need to revisit this at a later time. Like if it's
For
not
sure.
threatening my immediate physical well-being, if it's not like if it's not feeding me or keeping me from being fed, if it's not threatening my housing or something like that, it's like maybe it's not important. Like I thought yesterday, like not to just kind of continue dumping, but one of those like having moments or whatnot. I couldn't tell if somebody was being reckless on the road or if him and another driver, like what was going on. You have this person comes over, swerves, cuts me off, accelerates, then decelerates, goes, cuts somebody else off, slows
Wow.
down like they're going to make a left turn, and he just keeps jumping back and forth, and I'm trying to hang back, hang back, hang back, and I'm like,
Right.
after a while I'm either gonna try to speed up to get away from it, but at the same
Mm,
time, it's like you can't do too much because like your vehicles are monitored and you've got to follow the law. And still I would want to follow the law without monitoring. But it's like trying to interpret what's going on, and
sure.
like I think this happened maybe after I'd already stopped and filled up fuel or gas to continue my ride home after a long day of work. And the only thing that's going through my mind is like, I'm trying to get home. Like, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know if you're playing a game, if this is your backyard. It's like I'm going through these scenarios in my head, but at the same time, I'm thinking, none of that matters. I'm trying to get home. So I either need to get away from this person or I need to find a way to get home without having to do this yo yo effect. And for me, it's just I take driving kind of personal, like the defensive driving thing. I'm a rule follower, a conscientious person, so it's
Yeah.
like I've I've become more comfortable with the fact that hey, everybody moves to the beat of their own drum, but when you get into public spaces where it's like your actions have a direct effect on somebody else and me for that fact, that bothers me. But it's like thankfully I'm not going out of my way to like threaten somebody or something like that, but I'm like I can see why people just would rage kind of type thing. But kind of knowing what my limitations are in a sense is like okay, this short burst of emotion might not work to my benefit. So it's like it might just be best to let it go. Just let them do whatever, and I think eventually they turned wherever they were going. But it's like just thinking back to that and being like, yeah, there's probably a part here where I was wrong. And it's just kind of
Don't
funny thinking
worry.
about it.
Say it was two ways to respond to that. Sound like a really erratic situation.
Yeah.
You had to just respond.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in some cases I look at it and I'm like, it is what it is. Like I took both approaches because it's like you're just on the road for a good 30 minutes. That's like 3 hours altogether, maybe had like hour no issue, that little split there. And it's like the easiest thing would be, hey, let whatever develop, or find somewhere to hang out for a time and just let them do what it is. But there are there are crazy people. Like
Yes,
I
there
guess
are.
it's like there's no telling because I did do the whole pull up and try to look over and be like, who is in that car or what is it that they're doing? And it's a guy like I don't know if he's flustered or he's like mean mugging this, that, and the other. And I'm just like, yeah, that could have gone
He
differently.
did his car playing a
Like,
video game.
yeah, it's like it's people are interesting. Like at the same time we can be um beautiful, like, and then other times we can just be like irritating and just like what is this person
Considerate.
doing?
We could be all those.
Yeah, but I guess that's all you get all of it. You don't always get to pick and choose what you want. So
You got to
you got
take it in the vacuum at the end of the day. But
yeah,
I love it. I love us. I love
yeah,
us humans. We're good. We're good, but
that's true.
we're special. We're special. But how we respond is important to others is important. So I like it.
True. Well, I think I've kept you long enough, unless there's something I hadn't touched on you'd like to touch on.
No, I think we covered a ton just naturally in conversation. I learned a lot about what you do and where you come from, and your day to day, which is like, man, you do that, you do a lot, and and I like the story of the sleep number that fascinated me, and the consent as well. So you said a lot of good things that I'm taking notes and I'm gonna just sit on and like, how does that show up in my life? So I feel like I got more here. Thank you.
Awesome.
Arbitration, like all those things came up. So this is really, 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 really good.
That's pretty neat to discover about you too. And I'm like, man, like next time we'll have more to talk about. But I like how you take notes in conversation, and it's like it's um it's something I can appreciate. Like before, I would have the knee jerk reaction to say, "Oh, I should do that too." But in part of my practice of learning to do less and focus on doing one thing that I can be effective with, it's like, okay, like appreciate it, acknowledge Ty for what I see is something good that I recognize, and move on from there, or like just make it a mental note and learn to give that back to someone instead of like trying to hoard all the gifts for yourself, so to speak.
No, that's good. And I'll talk a second on. So what I do is because I'm a rapid thinker.
Mm,
And then again, maybe that's a normal thing for people. I don't know, but I'm a rapid thinker. And so when as conversations go, I have all these ideas and all these thoughts, and it relates to everybody. So I'll jot it down. And sometimes it's for me, sometimes for somebody else, but I'll just keep it. And
mm,
if it naturally comes back up, because I will hang on the person I'm speaking to every word. So I will forget that last thing because I'm listening intently on like, oh, okay. So I'll
mm,
write it down that way I'm like, "Oh, that he did say that. That was amazing." So when you start hitting some of those good things, I had to write it down for
gotcha.
later. So no, that was really good.
That's a neat trick. I like that.
Hey,
Awesome.
we got to figure out our own little system, right?
Yeah. Well, let people know how they can find you and connect with you if they want to work with you.
Oh, that's good. So I would say social wise, IG is probably the best way to connect. So the handle there would be my name, TY, the number one, and then Carter. That's the best way to reach out. And via email would be brandassetmedia@gmail.com. Those are the two best places to reach out. If you want to just talk and further, like me, Asher just did, which was amazing.
Awesome. And the one, is it the number one by itself or one spelled out?
No, it's actually the number one. So TY and the number one, and then
Gotcha.
Carter. Yeah.
Cool. Well, Ty, thank you so much for doing this. And from the first question I asked you, I'll ask it differently. Are you still who you said you were?
Oh God, I hope so. Yes, I am. You've actually made me double down with the arbitration one. So yes,
Awesome. So cool. Thank you again for doing this. And I look forward to sharing this little part of our conversation with the world.
man. Thanks for the invitation. We'll talk soon.